Hello, everyone. Wow, chat is busy today. Looks like a bunch of you have found us. Hi. Wow, amazing. Welcome to the season finale of Demo Days. Trying some different things today. Typically, this is a stream that is only on Twitch, but as some of you have noticed, we are somewhere else today too. Nice to see all of our Twitch regulars joining us today. And also nice to see all of our new friends. Super excited. We will get started pretty close to time, so it's still early. This is we have time to relax. Let everyone jump in, say hello. I am totally astonished that there's so many people here today. So do let me know where you're from. It's time to get those regional shout-outs going. I see so many cool folks, and yes, definitely, Benjamin, it is almost the weekend, and for those of us in the US, it's also going to be perhaps an even longer weekend with a holiday coming up. Yeah, so relax, grab a tasty beverage. Hello from the Ukraine. I see people from the Ukraine. If anyone happened to join us for the international community events that we've been holding recently, let me know too. I see Brazil. I see Austria. Wow, amazing. I see Egypt. Oh, so many folks here. It's making stuff fall on my desk. Hi, Canada. Nice to see you on the stream. Yes, awesome. Good stuff. Brazil, always in the house, always strong. Brazil. Nice to see y'all. France is here too. And we have a special guest coming straight from the moon. That is how big our reach is today. Amazing, right? Shout out to Wisconsin. Definitely a very important state today and every day. So thank you for joining us today. If there's anything in particular that you'd like to see, I'm planning season 2 right now of Demo Days. So if you can, send me an email, github.community, and let me know what you want to see from us. We've been doing a lot of deep dives in specific GitHub features for this first season, and the second season is going to be a super exciting one as well. And it'll be even more amazing if we can actually help you with something specific that you need help with. All right? So to get to what we're actually going to be doing today, we are going to be talking about what is DevOps and what is DevSecOps, right? And Thomas is going to join me really soon and take you through an amazing demo and talk about, like, what is this concept? How do I get started with it? How do I understand it? You know, what are the tools that I need to get started? So I'm super excited that we've got such a global audience today. Mexico is in the house as well. I see Ghana here right now, and given the timing, you know, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. This is pretty serious. I see someone saying that there's a little bit of echo, and I'll fix that shortly. But for the moment, just hang out, listen to music, let me know what you'd like to see. All right. India, yes, coming strong. See Cyprus, France, Netherlands, Brazil again. Awesome. Hi, Christine. Nice to see you. Is this your first time joining us? Yes, branches. I've got a question here. Oh, this hoodie? Yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of special. It is a fun hoodie, and unfortunately, it is not available. Sorry. Gotta keep the drip tight, keep the swag on lockdown. But there is plenty of swag that you can get. All you have to do is Google GitHub Shop, and you'll be able to see what's going on there. All right. I have never been to Brazil. I would totally love to go, and I am so excited for all of this stuff going on in the world to be done so that we can start traveling again. I really want to go. We've had some events in Brazil, like even virtual events recently. So keep an eye on that. We have a meetup group for it. You can check things out. And we have events in Brazil held in Brazilian Portuguese just for you. So hopefully I'll see you there. But in the future, we'd love to go there in real life. And that's when things will definitely get exciting. Yeah. Cool. All right. Oh, me. I am from San Francisco, and so I'm holding it down pretty close to where GitHub started. But even my team is globally distributed. If you've ever seen Mish Manners stream on Twitch, she is my colleague. We're on the same team, and she's in Australia. If you've ever seen Karan stream as well, he is my colleague in India. My boss is Martin, and he is in Northern Ireland. We've also got Paul in Seattle, and Anisha also in Seattle. I've got Sasha in Chicago. So, even just on my team, we are all over the place. GitHub is worldwide, and we are trying to do our best to be even more worldwide. All right, with that, I think I'm going to kill the music. And thank you everyone for the compliments on music. And I'm also going to switch my mic because, just the way the stack is, you gotta make things just right. And there's that. Thanks for bearing with me. This is all brand new stuff that we're trying. And I'm gonna bring on Thomas, who is going to be our host for today. Well, I guess I am the host, but Thomas is going to do the demo and talk about DevOps and DevSecOps. Hey, Thomas, what's up?
How's everyone doing? I've been watching the chat. I see people, as you were calling them out, all over the place. I saw a few Austin, Texas, and Texas in general. I'm actually based out of the Austin, Texas area. So hello to all the locals over here.
Yeah, it was funny. Like, Thomas and I were just talking yesterday about, it's going into a holiday over here in the US, and it's getting later into the month. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a quiet demo day stream today, and I was absolutely wrong. Like, this is incredible. It's awesome to see everyone here, and I really hope that you enjoy what Thomas has brought for us today. And like I said earlier, tell me what you need to know about GitHub. What can I do to help you going forward? And I will be putting together season 2 of Demo Days, and we'll start off the new year just right. All right, Thomas, I'm going to hand it over to you.
I just want to make sure real quick. I see a few people talking about sound being different. You're coming through on mono instead of stereo now. I only hear you on my left channel. So I'm not sure if I'm stereo or not, but just wanted to make sure folks are able to hear okay.
Okay, did that fix that?
Yes.
I think we're good now. Cool.
Okay. Well, everyone, thanks for coming out. Like AJ said, there's way more people showing up than we initially thought here. So pretty excited about that. I'm Thomas Hughes. I'm a DevOps engineer with GitHub, and been here about 3 years now. I just mentioned it a minute ago, I'm based out of the Austin, Texas area. Might be moving soon, not too sure yet, but we'll see how that goes. I'm seeing people from all over the place, from India, the UK, we have Germany, Italy. I think I saw Ireland earlier as well, Senegal. Really cool. That's pretty fun. So I actually enjoy like language learning and stuff like that. So je connais un peu français, ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch, quiero aprender español. I'm just now starting Spanish. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, so there we go. I guess with that being said, we can go ahead and get started here, AJ. And there's my slide deck. Cool. So today's talk, a few people have been asking what we're going with. So we are going to be talking about DevOps and DevSecOps. What this is. We have a whole bunch of lovely buzzwords in the industry, but we never really have clear definitions. It's kind of an assumed level of knowledge. So my goal with this is to kind of give that rough idea of what DevOps is as a whole, and then now the newer thing that's been coming out in the last few years is DevSecOps movement, and how does that look? And basically what that has to do with our software development life cycles, or the SDLC that you're doing, and how that kind of all plays together. So that said, let's go ahead and get started. So again, that's me, Senior DevOps Engineer with GitHub. Been here, coming up on my 3-year anniversary here pretty soon, based out of the Austin, Texas area. Like I said, I like learning languages. I like coding, of course, in my side time and everything. Earlier this morning, I was head down on a few different projects, so it's always fun. Always pretty good time. Always changing things up. So what are we talking about today? Basically, this whole DevOps idea, it's a newer idea in the general scheme of things if we look at how software has been developed over time. So we're going to start with just kind of a quick story of kind of what many developers looked at when, in a pre-DevOps world, as well as what security teams kind of looked like beforehand. We're going to talk about and identify some of the problems that were in these old models, which spawned kind of this shifting left movement, another buzzword, and what that shifting left movement is, how it solves problems, how DevOps comes into play, what is that DevOps exactly, what does security do when we add security to DevOps, and then how GitHub's helping with this too. One of the things I'm excited about at the end is I'm going to give it just a few pro tips, kind of like rollout plan ideas of hey, this is how you can start implementing DevOps and transform your own organization. So that all said, I'm seeing Git commands and everything in the chat. That's great. Hello from Tunisia, Greece. Yeah, all over. This is great. So cool. Let's go ahead and get into it then. So you've probably seen something like this before, of showing like a development process, and whether you're doing waterfall stuff or Scrum or Agile or extreme programming or anything like that. You have these same basic pieces here, right? So we have a code piece, we have some type of testing going on, we have deployment, sometimes into a few different environments. And in this case, on this screen, I'm showing a deployment for like a dev QA area, a pre-production area, and then a production area. And the key part that I want to call out here is this is how development looked, is with these kind of barriers between these different processes. So a lot of times we had developers that were working solely on code. And of course there were front-end developers, back-end developers, and this whole full stack thing was kind of a new idea. They wanted to have more specialized people. Moving into, after I finished my coding, I'd send it to a dedicated QA team often. And that QA team would do all the testing, oftentimes very manual. Maybe they were using some UI test tools or something like that, but it's not the best basically, but they were kind of in their own little silo or their own world. And they would say, okay, let me deploy this to a dev environment or a QA environment. I'm going to go ahead and run some additional testing. I'm going to do performance testing and all of that. This looks good. So let me go ahead and pass it to the operations team. Now we have the operations team. They decide, okay, we're going to put this in a pre-production environment. So we're going to do our deployment now. And hopefully everything's working along this process here, because I am siloed off from the rest of this team. I am siloed from the QA people. I'm siloed from the dev team, right? And now operations says, okay, we're ready to finally put this in production. We're going to go into our final deployment. We're going to monitor things and all of that, right? So pretty straightforward. This process, like I said, is something that you still do today, of course, in more modern practices. But the idea is we want to try to start removing those barriers between the teams. So where do we look at from, or where do we come from on the security side instead, right? So security kind of had their own little silo thing going on, and in some ways it was even worse. So if you think about security, there's kind of these different points, and I could kind of add more and more to these, but I wanted to give a good overview basically. But security also had silos. We had someone that would do manual scanning of code. someone that would create reports based off of, network logs or something like that. They would review those reports, and maybe that's a different person too. And then we'd have some configuration or policy change, and we'd have a policy team, we have a configuration team, and all of these things would be separate pieces that don't really work well together because of the nature of the structure that's been on the teams and the idea or concept of way security worked. The other thing is all of this pretty much happened after the code was in production, right? So we would deploy code out there, and then we'd say, oh, hey, there was a security vulnerability. We got to take care of that now. So pretty crazy, right? Pretty crazy. So you're taking a quick look at chat. It's moving so fast, but I see, okay, yeah, more people from Warsaw. Bitbucket rules. Bitbucket, hey, to each their own. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on here. I don't see any initial questions popping out. Yeah. So, as I think it's pretty clear here, there's some obvious, silos, right? And these silos I'm representing with literal brick walls between teams, because sometimes it's that bad. And there are companies that still struggle with this today, even when they think they've implemented some modern process or new tooling and things like that. At the end of the day, it's people that are really involved here and across the process, right? Whether you're a developer, you're a QA person, you're in security, you're in operations, or you're doing kind of a bag trick of everything, right? There's people involved with it. And I think that's where a lot of companies have made mistakes in the past. It's not recognizing this problem that was actually being solved with DevOps. It's not just a new buzzword, but there's actually a reason for it. So like I said, it should be pretty clear, but the developers were pretty siloed off from QA teams in most organizations. QA and developers were often siloed from the security team, who's also siloed from the operations team. And these pieces just don't work well together. So, what problems does this come from or cause, right? Well, the problems that we see is, people will then start having issues with like, oh, well, this is a developer problem. Why is the QA team handling it? Or the QA team's like, well, hey, that's a security thing. That's outside of our realm. I'm not going to test about that. Operations is like, oh, what the heck? This code doesn't even work. How come QA passed this? Right. So there's kind of this problem of disconnect, and the reporting structure in a lot of organizations, when they're formed with these silos like this, do not allow for inter-team collaboration very well. There really is some like literal boundaries here. So it's something to take note of, and something that we want to make sure that we kind of keep track of here. So I do see the ask to speak a little slower. I apologize. I get excited about these topics. So yeah, basically, again, just this idea of silos. I'm really trying to hit that point home that stops communication. It's turns into a blame game, right? We start blaming it on other teams and all of that. So, what's the other problem that we see here? Well, GitHub actually had we have a data science team that did an analysis of 70 million lines of code in all the major open source projects over the last 5 years. And what this chart is showing is that kind of purple trend on top is the lines of code increasing over time. So over the last 5 years from April to April for this report. And what we see is the number of security threats trending right along with it. And at times it's at a higher acceleration or a higher growth rate than the lines of code, which means that, just because we're putting more code out there, this kind of makes sense. They're proportional to each other. Where we put more code out there, more security threats are possible now because there's more code to exploit, right? So it's really, really interesting. There's kind of a bilateral, y-axis chart on here. Security threats is on the scale on the right-hand side with lines of code on the left. But, basically what we found is for almost 70 million lines of code, there's around 10,000 security threats, where when we had, if I just pick a different intersection, 42 million lines of code, there were 7,200, right? So it's just a matter of kind of that growth of security problems, I guess, over time. That's kind of the second piece to this. So I do see a few people asking for slower still. I apologize. I'm really going to try to be better. We definitely try to do that. Okay. So what do we do to solve this, right? Well, this was a recognized problem. People started talking about these siloed off areas just aren't working. We need to find a way to bring the teams together, work better together. We can't wait till the end for, QA, or we can't wait till the end for security or something like that. We really need this feedback faster. As movements came out like agile and lean and all these other things, we need to find a way to allow these types of things to happen between teams a little bit better. So I will have to pull, I see a few people asking what constitutes a security threat for that previous slide here. Great question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but maybe AJ or someone can check for me on that. I'll see if I can get that answer for you, for sure. Okay, so that said, though, I apologize. I don't have that right away. I'll definitely look for that. So shifting left is kind of the solution that we came up with, or I should say the industry came up with as a fun buzzword that kind of means, we need to take this QA and security process and move it left, that is earlier, into our development process. So a lot of people have seen something like this before, I'm sure, where there's some type of requirements gathering phase, there's a design phase, a coding phase, you have test, acceptance testing, push it out to production, and there's monitoring and maintenance mode, right? And this is the same whether it's waterfall, if you're iterating in sprints, you're going through these phases basically regardless. So the idea is, well, why don't we bring QA earlier into the process? Why don't we bring security earlier into the process? And there's a few reasons why we want to do that. Part of the reason is, of course, these silos that I've been talking about, but there's really a lot of other real tangible reasons why we would want to do this. It increases collaboration. It allows the teams and people to work more fluidly with less, blame and pointing back and forth because they're involved in the whole process. And we get to, kind of see, well, I'll go to the next slide, I guess, because I have some reasons here on the why. But we get to see these benefits of shifting left and kind of seeing where that goes to. So, one thing, obviously, I think everyone knows, QA and security are both going to ensure your software works properly, which at the end of the day, we all want to ship higher quality code faster and more securely, right? No one wants to put code out there that's going to cause some big problem or something like that. So, that's kind of the first piece, is recognizing that QA and security really are paramount to this entire development flow. Doing the shift left thing also allows you to do a few other buzzwords out there. You get to fail earlier, right? So failing early means that, maybe while I'm in the initial feature development, I have a unit test fail that tells me I'm breaking something. Instead of waiting for that code to go all the way through to a QA team and them telling me later and having to hand it back, right? And then there's a disconnect between the QA team and the developer and trying to find out what the actual bug was and all of that fun stuff, right? So there's obviously limits to this, but the more early testing we can do on both the security and QA front, the better we can feel about deployment confidence, the better it is in terms of a lower cost to fix the problem. It's much easier while I'm developing a feature that isn't in production to find a bug and fix it than it is for that to go out to production, have a user come in and tell me about the bug. Maybe that bug was some type of crazy exploit, or something that broke the shopping cart completely, and now my sales are completely dropping until this is fixed, right? So there's this whole deployment confidence mixed with the earlier you fail, the more secure you can feel because you know that you've done your proper testing in QA along the entire path. Taking a brief pause, I see a few questions about recording. The video will be available on YouTube, and I know it's on Twitch, and we're streaming it a few places. So I'm sure I see AJ replying here, but yes, YouTube will probably be the best place, GitHub's YouTube channel. So what else does shifting left do for us? It also allows us to automate things, right? So this idea of having testing more involved, well, why don't we automate some of that testing? That's where unit tests come from. These test frameworks that have come out here. We have tools like Selenium and Cucumber and TestNG and all these fun ones that allow us to get better feedback on our code. And again, it saves us money as a company because we get to find out about these earlier in the process, put out fixes, and then those fixes will allow us to continue to iterate without having to revert a whole bunch of code, right? And that kind of plays right into the next piece, reducing future technical debt. So technical debt, just to put everyone on the same page, what I mean by that is, if there's constantly bugs that I'm fixing or constant, work that needs to be done that isn't directly impacting my product in terms of new features or new development, that we call debt, and that builds up over time. And I have an example of this. One of my first jobs at a startup actually was involved with, I was a software development engineer in test, an SDET, right? A QA engineer, whatever you want to call it there. And the company had 2-week sprints. And in every sprint, they had to reserve 20 hours per developer on each team to handle the bugs that were coming in. They had so many interrupters that they couldn't commit to certain items in their sprint because they knew they were going to have bugs come up. So, something that I did is I let them know how to do unit testing, how to do this and that, and kind of ran a bunch of brown bags and things like that, and showed them that, yes, we have a huge amount of debt now, but if every time you fix a bug, you write a test, you're slowly chipping away at that. So it's just kind of helping us by reducing that down by having that process earlier into the equation here, right? So, what does that do then? Well, that then allows me to ship faster. So I'm confident in my deployment that's coming up because all the code that I have is passed, all these checks that I have for security and QA, integration testing, I had container scanning, all these things, right? Well, I can push the code out a little bit faster because I'm more confident now in that code. If I have 10% coverage of my code, 90% of that application's never been tested, or maybe had someone manually going through clicking things, there's probably a higher chance of a bug showing up or security issue than if I had, 90% of the code base covered, right? So there's definitely some balancing there. And the last thing, excuse me, let me take a quick sip here. The last thing is kind of a fun one, but also not at the same time, because it could have been quite terrible. But shifting left and this idea of getting better quality and security could literally help prevent lawsuits, such as a few examples I listed here, death, and even nuclear war, right? And let me explain those here, because you might think nuclear war, wow, what are we talking about? Well, verse 2, the Therac 25 in Panama City are fairly similar. There was software that would dose radiation for cancer patients that had a bug in it. And the bug caused something like 10x amount of radiation to be delivered to the patient. And it actually resulted in a few people dying, many people getting radiation sickness and poisoning. At the time in one of these, I think it was the Panama City one, the developers that wrote the code for that software were actually held civilly responsible for the deaths. So, I mean, there's some big implications here. And if we had better testing, maybe, that could have been caught instead of being out there and actually harming someone. Patriot missile system, that's a missile defense system that the US developed and is in many, many different countries at this point. Same thing, they had a timing bug. The idea is that it shoots a missile to interrupt an incoming missile, so they blow up in the air instead. And if the timing's off, well, it's just going to fly right past that missile. And that happened. It hit a military base. I think there was something like 100 people got injured in that. So it's pretty crazy for sure. And the last one, and maybe I shouldn't say fun, but most interesting case is this idea of nuclear war. So during the Cold War, which is between mostly the US and the USSR, the former Soviet Union, there was actually a software bug that caused the USSR's early missile detection system to think that the US had launched a nuclear warhead at Russia. So this actually happened. This is something you can look up. Their detection system said there's a nuke, and they called the officer on duty immediately, said, should we go ahead and go through and retaliate, basically? And the guy said, I think if the US attacked us, they send more than one nuke. So this must be a bug. And literally his decision stopped what could be nuclear war, right? So, this idea of quality and security, there's really like tangible reasons why we care about this. It's not just amount of I see this is getting a little bit dark. I hope you can help us. Yeah. So, this is not just about, saving the company money at the bottom line type thing. There's instances of recalls of like Intel computer or CPUs that had to be recalled because of software bugs that cost millions of dollars. But, outside of just the monetary part, there's people's lives that are involved in these things. And I think that's kind of an important piece to call out here as well. So how do we prevent all of this? Let's make sure we don't do this in the future, right? Well, we came out with this concept of DevOps. And DevOps literally, combining developers and operation teams into a more collaborative experience. So there's many, many, many different, you know, I guess, definitions of DevOps and how people can define it with different tooling and people teams and all this fun stuff. But at the end of the day, connecting people and teams together to increase collaboration is what we kind of define DevOps as within GitHub and within the industry as a whole. So what does DevOps bring to the table? How does it solve some of these problems for us? So first of all, it allows for more consistency in all of our operations processes. Right? You've probably heard of this as code type phrasing before, infrastructure as code, pipeline as code. We have, policy as code, configuration as code. There's so many different versions out there now. And, what DevOps has done is we say, okay, hey, developer, let's help automate and standardize some of our operations and processes. And this is going to be the same now each time because we have set code, right? That code also goes through pull request processes. It gets code reviewed. So any change to even a policy can be reviewed and has more collaboration across the teams. The policy team gets to jump into that now. The developer gets to help write some automation for it. Maybe the QA team says how the process should look. So there's a lot more involved there. Finally, this kind of reduces that friction as well. If I mentioned silos, I showed the brick walls between teams earlier. So this friction between the teams is a real problem. And there's a lot of blame that gets put back and forth. That's not my job. That's the QA's team to do that type of thing. So DevOps bringing all these processes together and allowing better collaboration really allows for that friction to reduce as well and lets everyone work better together. That said, what does then security happen when we go into DevSecOps now, the latest of the buzzwords in the DevOps world, right? So DevOps specifically is kind of this developer operation connection. DevSecOps is simply adding the DevOps principles of automating and standardizing things into the security realm. Right. So we're going to allow now security teams to also be involved in this process of working throughout your entire software pipeline. I want to be involved earlier in the detection phase, whether it's through code scanning or secret scanning or something like that. I'm going to be going into the kind of middle QA stage where we're testing out like dependencies and does this actually go out there? Is there any SQL injection issues or something like that. And then, moving forward, security also tests things, of course, after it's out in production, checking logs and ensuring that things like, hackers coming in or DDoS attacks, things like that. So there's kind of a big piece that security needs to touch. And doing this in an automated way is where DevOps has helped out to bring this kind of DevSecOps idea. So, automating the detection of this stuff through things like Dependabot at GitHub or, Codacy or Fortify or just any of those code analysis tools, those are all ways to help out with this, right? What does that do for us too? Well, of course, it reduces potential leaks of maybe a secret in my code. It could help prevent a breach if my code has some type of known vulnerability that gets caught. It helps you collaborate on configuration and policy. So, security teams also have lots of configuration and policy concerns. It's not just operations working on infrastructure. Excuse me. A lot of security personnel are also network agents, or not agents, I guess, network engineers, right? And they have to do things like configuring their switches or firewall policies, right? And if we make that all in this DevOps world of putting that as code, right? Now we have policy and configuration as code. So having things like Puppet, Chef, Terraform plans, ARM templates for Azure, AWS has something similar to that. Terraform, I already said it. So, these types of things are really modernizing these processes and bringing it to a whole new realm where it's not just, one security person doing these manual configurations and manual reports and stuff like that, but we actually have automation that's doing all of this for us. And we're getting into such a better place now where we can find out more than just relying on a manual process, right? So it's quite fun, quite fun. I enjoy it. There's a lot of pieces to it. And, GitHub's helping with this. So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the things that we've been doing to help out with this DevOps and DevSecOps movement. So first of all, you've probably heard about the whole GitHub Advanced Security thing, but if you haven't, it's kind of our feature set that is constantly evolving, getting better all the time, it seems to be. And it includes things like CodeQL, a query language that allows you to scan your code for static code analysis. It works for quite a few different languages right now. I think there's some like container scanning parts of it as well. It's hard to keep track because it's constantly getting better, which is great. Secret scanning, that's another thing. So how many times have you maybe used an environment file and it wasn't part of your git ignore, so guess what, you did a git commit, and then now suddenly I have a secret that's out of my code base, it's in my git history, it's on a public repo because I was trying to do open source, and now everyone has my token, right? So secret scanning is allowing us to detect those earlier and validate those secrets where appropriate, if the vendors allow us to do that type of thing. And really just kind of, again, try to detect this stuff, try to make it a more secure development environment for you. So there's some questions right now about how DevSecOps works and if any tools hooked into GitHub can be ran to detect vulnerabilities, what's available for various programming languages. So that's what I'm going over right now is, CodeQL. I don't remember the full list. I want to say it's 5 or 6 of the major languages at the moment. I think .NET, .NET, C#, Java, JavaScript. I don't remember what else. I think Ruby is in there as well, and a few others. Many of the major programs are being covered by that right now. So major programming languages, I should say, excuse me. So, okay, so we're covering some secrets. We're doing some static code analysis now. What about open source? Like, I am consuming open source products. We just had that graph earlier that showed that as open source products continue to grow and more lines of code are contributed, we see more and more threats. So it seems like if I'm dependent on all these open source projects, there needs to be some checking there to make sure those products are not introducing vulnerabilities that I didn't even code. It's just because I use some other module or some other package or something like that. I wound up introducing a vulnerability I didn't know about. So dependency insights, we actually have something called Dependabot, and Dependabot will go out, scan your dependencies for, let's say NPM, for example, and it will look for new versions to come out. And where it can, it'll even open a pull request to bump the version number for you if it thinks it won't be like a major impact. Of course, you still want to test that, changing the version number of a dependency doesn't break your code or anything. But the idea is we're alerting you to, hey, you have dependencies that now have known vulnerabilities. You need to know about this. You need to take care of this. This is something we want to call out to you. And part of that process of calling it out came with what we have as security policies now too. So there's a security tab on the repository where you can set a space for people to report vulnerabilities in your code. And you can discuss these privately without a public setting at all. Even if it's a public repo, the security tab stuff is private instead. And there's information you can put there on how you could report a vulnerability. And then there's also, again, that full internal discussion. And of course, the great thing about GitHub and having all those discussions on GitHub is you get to chat about the vulnerability right where the vulnerability was reported. You don't have to go to some separate software or something like that. Another thing that we have for security, we've had it for quite a while now, is that the branch protections, I'm sure you've seen, those have gotten better over the years too. But basically you can do things like not allow force pushes. I saw some people doing a git push -- force, I think, in the chat earlier. So, blocking that so people don't just, force push to their main default branch. That wouldn't be a good thing. Having these security advisories, having this the security policies in place, just all of it's allowing people to collaborate on this full piece of security now in a much better automated way. There's always going to be room for improvements. There might be other tooling that you'd use as well, but GitHub's trying to be part of more of the tool chain to really help people get set up and just built into one platform. So last thing I have, I just wanted to talk about the audit logging some too. So, as an organization on GitHub, there's a lot more logging efforts going into things now. You get audit logs of people being added or removed from repositories, access changes, repositories being deleted or created. You get a lot of information there. And then, of course, the other benefit that we see is through pull requests, which has obviously been with GitHub since we started. Pull requests are literally documenting what changes are happening to our configuration, to our policy, to our code, and why, right? And we get the full conversation right there. Again, it's not something that I have to go to a separate tool and read all this information. I get to talk about the code changes and the documentation changes right in line where the change happened, which is pretty awesome. I like that aspect the most, I think. So, okay, we talked about quite a bit. I'm, pretty sure everyone's probably bought into the idea of DevOps, DevSecOps, wanting to get all these pieces put together. How do I do this? Well, I do have some pro tips for you. I wanted to cover a few things that I recommend based on customers that I've worked with over time, enterprises I've helped implement these DevOps transformations, and just kind of things that I've done even on a personal level before I was at GitHub. So the first thing is I will give a shout out to Simon Sinek. He wrote a book called Start With Why. If you ever get a chance to read it, it's great. If you want to see the cliff notes, there's a TED Talk called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And he kind of gives the idea there, basically. But this whole concept is, this is a lot of change. Like I'm telling my developers that, hey, you're not just a front-end developer now, you're also going to be doing back-end, so you're a full stack. And by the way, we also want you to start worrying about QA more. So you're also going to start writing testing. And oh, hey, also security, who used to be at the end of the pipeline, they're going to be talking to you more often now about vulnerabilities. And just, change. Maybe we're going to implement new tooling. Well, now I have to learn a new tool as well as a developer. So it's kind of like this constant pain point of just pushing that information out there. And really, if you start with why instead, which is more of what I tried to do here, in this presentation even, of, what's the problem? What are we fixing here before you tell me what we're doing to fix it? It's a lot more impactful to developers. I mentioned a story earlier where I said that, the developers on the engineering teams that I kind of worked with as a test engineer were telling me just constantly, like 20 plus hours a week, they're fixing bugs. And it's like people have tried to push them to get better test coverage and they just saw it as a lot of work. But as soon as I showed them, hey, this is actually going to make it to where you can work on things and not have to worry about as many bugs anymore. Like just write a test because you keep saying this bug cropped up again or something like that. Well, write a test and let's hope that it doesn't come up again now. And then you can actually work on more meaningful, impactful things where you're not getting burnt out by just doing bug fixes constantly, right? So giving that why is impactful, and I'd highly, highly recommend that. Remembering that people are the core of this, and this isn't just a tooling change, this is a culture change. You're doing a DevOps transformation or a DevSecOps transformation. We are literally changing the way we develop software within our organization, right? So there are people involved in that. And sometimes that gets lost when the CTO of a company says, hey, we're going to start doing DevSecOps. We just bought licenses for all these different tools, so go do it. And that's not really fair to the people at the end who are actually doing the work. So having this kind of slow rollout process, really making sure that they understand why this is happening, how it's improving their day-to-day livelihood. No one wants to read logs all the time. If I can automate something to parse my logs to, call out the things that I care about instead of me scrolling through logs by myself, that's going to make my job better, right? I can do more fun things now because my automation's taking care of it. We want to keep that idea in mind, basically. So what's another way we can do this then? So I talked about slow rollout. One thing that we say where I'm at in the professional services side of GitHub is we talk about a lighthouse team. So a lighthouse team is that symbol, that beacon on the engineering team. Maybe they have a smaller project or a new project that doesn't have a bunch of legacy stuff that's going to get you stuck, having to worry about, oh, is this compatible or not? I don't know because I'm working in clear case or something like that. And you get to have this lighthouse team kind of pilot the program for you. Hey, can you guys start writing more tests and let's see how that goes? And then they start doing that better. They see the improvements. They go through the pain points as well, right? And they see, okay, yeah, well, I noticed that writing tests actually did open up a lot more bandwidth for me to do personal skill development or to do feature development. And I got to do this new proof of concept that for a new shopping cart that I wouldn't have had time to do, and it got accepted. And now we're going to build a new shopping cart for the website. I'm really excited about that, right? So you have this lighthouse team that kind of gets through the initial barriers, and they have less barriers or lower barriers of entry because they're usually smaller teams, smaller projects, or, again, newer projects even that can be a little bit more flexible. And all of this together is, again, not going to work if your people can't collaborate. And I mentioned this some earlier with the silos, but I was talking about organizational structure, literally not allowing people to collaborate. So that's a very important thing. You can have all the best tooling out there. You can have all the modern, newest, coolest thing out there. But if you aren't letting the people talk to each other, you're still not going to be able to implement this idea of DevOps, DevSecOps, right? We still need people to be able to chat. We need the developers to talk to the operations and monitoring teams. We need security to work with the developers along the process. We need our QA folks that maybe are embedded with developers now, or maybe still a dedicated group of people to work very closely with our development. We need to be able to get that feedback, right? So, allowing people to collaborate here is going to be kind of my final tip of just, you can't just roll out process. You have to see all the pieces to it, basically, right? It's not just a tooling problem. It's not just a process problem. It's an overall people thing where we really need to change the culture here. So that all said, coming up to the end of this here, wanted to wrap it up, just kind of recap everything we talked about over the last 45 minutes or so. Where we came from is this problem of very firm silos, right? Developers didn't talk to QA didn't talk to the operations team. No one talked to security because no one wanted to have to fix anything. So just hard silos, right? And that caused problems where, we see things like more security vulnerabilities happening all the time, significant impact to not just like the bottom line with money, but like potentially people's lives in the sense of, this whole QA and quality of my code and security of my code. So this idea of shifting left came out to do that. And shifting left is really what started spawning this DevOps movement, right? So again, this is all outside of things. You can do waterfall. You can have DevOps in waterfall, DevSecOps in waterfall. A lot of people think agile is DevOps, and that's not the case. DevOps is the people, and the people involved in collaboration. Yes, they use different tooling. Yes, they have means of doing things and processes to follow. However, the people collaborating is really the core piece here. And allowing those DevOps principles to go into DevSecOps has allowed security to now be involved in this collaboration effort, the automate the boring things, right? There's a really good book on Python called Automate the Boring Things with Python, I believe is the title. Super good. There's just a lot of exciting things that can happen when this is done well, and then you have this kind of well-oiled machine going on. So, we talked about how GitHub's helping. So again, there's the things like the the dependent bot, the code scanning, secret scanning, all those fun pieces. And you'll probably hear more about that at GitHub Universe in a few weeks here. I think it's December 8th through the 10th. So, we're doing what we can to try to be more involved in the full pipeline, not just the code piece anymore. We want to be more involved in the pipeline and allow developers to collaborate across everything here. And lastly, we talked about these rollout plans, right? So just remembering, again, Simon Sinek, I love that book, Start With Why. Telling developers or the people at the end why we're making a change before you roll out a change, and showing them that because of this is going to help you, not have to do as many bug fixes. And the way we're going to have you not do as many bug fixes is by having this new tool called, NUnit or something. And then NUnit is going to allow us to write more unit tests. But you start by saying that the real reason here is that we're going to reduce the amount of bugs that you have to fix. Right. And it gives it a lot more of an appeal to developers, is doing something like that. So just kind of keep that in mind, that the people are kind of your key asset here as we talk about things. So if you want to read more, we have quite a bit of content on DevOps and DevSecOps within GitHub. So I do want to clear a quick question I just saw come in. Can we do Agile and DevSecOps? Yes, of course. Agile, Scrum, any of those things, it's totally possible to do. But the idea is that DevOps is the people portion of it and collaboration, more so than the focus on tooling and how we use this. Whether I'm doing a 2-week sprint or I'm doing Kanban or extreme programming or waterfall, that doesn't necessarily matter as much in the sense of just DevOps specifically and what DevOps is. And we actually talk about that a little bit more in some of these blog posts that I have linked here. So these will be in the description of the video, I believe, on YouTube. So this is being recorded. It'll be uploaded to YouTube on the GitHub YouTube channel. So you'll be able to see these. But if you go to the GitHub blog, there's, what is code scanning? Why is it awesome? How to achieve DevSecOps maturity. There's a myths and misconception DevOps post, which is pretty cool. My former manager actually wrote that one. We actually have a whole roundup of DevSecOps resources that are really neat. It includes even some like customer callouts and white papers and things like that, to where you can really read about people that have implemented DevOps and DevSecOps. And yeah, just lots and lots of content. So it's pretty cool. In addition, if you're interested specifically in the GitHub Advanced Security piece, there is a link actually down below the stream that will allow you to have someone from our sales team reach out about advanced security and kind of those pieces. And then if you're interested in just DevOps and DevSecOps in general, there's actually an upcoming stream that we should have a link below as well for the sign up for that. It's actually going to be with the Google Cloud team, and they're going to be talking about how they've done continuous integration and delivery, CI/CD, using GitHub Actions for the Google Cloud platform. So should be a pretty cool talk as well. I won't be in that one, I don't think, other than maybe just a viewer, but definitely encourage you to sign up for those as well. So with that said, I think we're going to go ahead and move to questions here. Let me go ahead and see what we've got. I do see one question that was saved earlier. Thank you, AJ. Let me read it real quick here. Okay, so how much should automated security and QA process related to checking primarily external things like libraries being imported or used in the file system? Okay, how much should we use automated security QA practices against external versus internal things is the question, basically. So there's curiosity around what tests and automated pipeline processes would look like. So that's the thing, right? Is the more you do this, you don't want to slow down your developers too much, right? As we shift left and we put more on those early processes, you could almost go too far too quickly, where you don't have these well-defined like pipeline set up just yet. So, as a rough example, just because you asked for kind of an example pipeline, I might see something where the developers are writing their own unit tests, and they can run those tests locally, or they can deploy their code to a dev environment to run locally if they needed to. There is then maybe a little bit of a higher level of QA done on like a staging environment or something like that, where we do things like our integration tests. We can run our static code analysis. We can do all of that piece. I guess even before that, secret scanning would already catch as the developer's pushing code up if there's any tokens in the code or anything like that. So let's see, doing this off the top of my head, so I apologize if I'm jumping a little bit, but yeah, probably secret scanning on that piece for security. And then in that kind of QA environment, before we push out to a production or a staging area, we would talk about like our static code analysis, dependencies, just kind of making sure that all of our ducks are in a row here, and there's not any major OWASP, top 10 security vulnerabilities or something like that. And then, I would say from there, if we get like the green light, I don't like the continuous delivery portion so much, where people are, or continuous deployment, where people are constantly putting out code instantly without like a manual check to click a button. I think that that's possible in some situations, but it's pretty tough. So I would say that the final check would be like your acceptance testing, just kind of your last rundown. Did we have anything weird happen with our manual testing that happened, or our UI test or something like that? And then we can go in and push it out to production. So the way GitHub does that is we actually have all of our developers writing our own tests, unit and integration testing. We have a performance test person who does a lot of performance testing for us, of course, on how things are doing. We push a lot of code behind feature flags that allows us to test things in a live environment or in a dev environment without having to have everyone get access to that code. And then basically our security practices are through all of that. So the things that I've talked about, secret scanning, dependency management through Dependabot, all of those pieces are all kind of involved in that too. So it's pretty cool. Let's see here. I see a few other questions. Let's see. What's the industry standard for an OS? I'm not sure that question completely actually, but I guess as far as like where I would be testing things and stuff like that, probably like a Linux or, yeah, I mean, Linux or Windows, I guess, if you're doing like .NET, but probably a Linux environment. Let's see. I believe the fact that DevOps and DevSecOps is more of a culture that one should nurture in their workforce and enjoy the essence of it. Absolutely. So that was Arun. Yeah, absolutely. It's a culture movement. This transformation is not just we bought new tools. It's not just, hey, we need testing. It's really a culture movement and an adaptation that needs to happen from your development teams, from your QA teams, your security teams. Let's see here. I see some folks talking about like switching like GitHub instead of TFS. Totally easy to do. There's some migration paths out there to move code over if you're interested in doing that. Faith is linking a blog post for us as far as the DevSecOps shifting left and GitOps and things like that. That's pretty cool. Thank you. Let's see. Can we do all these pipelines that I talked about in YAML script? Depending on what you're using to run your scripts, yes, YAML is totally one of the standards out there that a lot of pipelines use. Travis, Circle CI, and Actions, GitHub Actions are all in YAML. Jenkins, I think you can do YAML, but a lot of people do Groovy script instead. So just kind of depends on what you want to use there. Let's see. Git Guardian's also good at scanning potential security threats. Yeah, there's a lot of tooling out there. It's actually pretty interesting. There's a lot of startups who have come up recently who have built like entire businesses basically on security testing. Obviously there's Black Duck, but there's also ones like Anchor, who was on stage at GitHub Universe last year for container scanning. There's, Twistlock, Codacy, there's a bunch of them out there, and GitHub Actions and Advanced Security is trying to get into the DevOps realm as well, since not everyone wants to have all these different tools all the time. They maybe want kind of that single unified platform. But one of the great things about GitHub, in my opinion, is our ecosystem is so strong that, pretty much any tool that is being adopted in any space really, but especially in a wider adoption, is going to integrate with GitHub in some way, because people know that, GitHub is where so many developers are and all of that. So let's see here. So prerequisites for DevSecOps, that is a great question. I think if I was going to talk about DevSecOps and kind of those prereqs, I would probably talk about just kind of formulating the plan. Let's see. Formulating the plan on how we're going to roll this out. So I talked about rollout plans as far as things like, finding a few teams that can maybe adopt some of these principles and having them go through the pain points and kind of documenting that process. And that will help me standardize the process to then allow for a greater adoption throughout the organization. So, if I have one team that's my pilot team that is going to go through and find all these issues, then, maybe we catch 50% of the headaches that every other team's going to have. And then we introduce another team or two, and those teams come on and maybe they have a few other nuances specific to their, their situation. So we would want to cover that too. So that's kind of how I would do it. It's just this kind of very planned out, slow, understand it's a culture change that takes time, and remembering that there's people involved that are impacted by the changes that, you're making as a leader. So let's see, I guess just kind of wrapping up here. I'll see if I can take maybe one more question. I like this one. How to switch from a developer to DevOps. Just think about it as far as things, if you find repeatable things that you're doing or people on your team are doing over and over again. I mentioned like reading logs and looking for a certain call out or something like that. Why not find a way to automate that instead? a real quick example, this morning what I was working on is we do things like this demo day or hackathons and stuff like that. So I actually set up a serverless function to handle registration for hackathons, and it's all completely agnostic. It will work with any repository that we set up to kind of handle our registration and things like that. So that was a manual process of setting all those things up before. Now it's automated. I never have to touch it again, hopefully, and everyone gets to benefit from it. So let's see. That all said, thank you so much. I know there's more questions coming in, but I think we need to be wrapping up here in a moment. So this video is going to be available on YouTube soon, AJ?
Yep, that's right. I'm gonna get it up on YouTube as soon as possible. But definitely, thanks, Thomas. This has been an amazing talk, and I know that a lot of folks have gotten a lot out of it in the chat. They seem to be super into it, and I also want to thank everyone in chat for joining us today. It's pretty amazing. I know that it is definitely like the wee hours for some of you folks, especially in India. This is time when you should be sleeping, but you're here with us, and so I definitely appreciate that. I know folks are having their evenings and they've decided to join us today, and I definitely want to respect that you've all taken out the time to come and listen to us today and want to do what we can to bring you really valuable content coming in the future. So give us a holler. Thomas mentioned the contact sales links and links for other sessions. We'll put that all up on the YouTube channel so that you can easily find it. Things have been a little complicated today because this is a new way for us to stream, and so like I've been dealing with having chat show up in 2 different places, and all this other swimming duck stuff that you don't necessarily need to care about, but we are trying to make things easier for you to find. So we'll work on that. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you soon. Daddy. Oh, that's my cue.
Thanks, everyone.
Since they're not old enough to walk.
Nice.
Like